Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Junkyard Dawgcast. I'm your host, Jordan Hill. Got Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk with us on a preview pod and also a / breaking news pod. We'll get to Swamp 24/7's Graham Hall later on this episode if you are listening to the podcast. But we are leading off. We were recording this part of the pod on Wednesday because of some news revolving around Georgia, Florida. We learned on Wednesday that Georgia, Florida is still going to be a neutral site game once the construction is undergone in Jacksonville Stadium, EverBank Stadium, getting some major renovations. The Georgia-Florida game will be played in Atlanta's Mercedes-Benz Stadium in 2026 and Tampa's Raymond James Stadium in 2027. That 2-year move is necessary because of these renovations. The plan is for the game to stay in Jacksonville, return in Jacksonville in 2028. Kirby Smart was asked about this on the SEC Coaches Teleconference. I'll read his quote. It's been talked about and debated for a long time, for a while, since we've known the Jacksonville renovation was going to occur. I think the parties involved did a great job of managing it. I think Jacksonville did a great job stepping up and making it worthwhile for both universities. I'm excited about the opportunity to play at 2 different locations, so that'll be unique. Maybe we learn from these 2 experiences. So, again, there was a lot of interest, I know, in folks seeing this game played back on campus again as it was in 1994-95. But the game will be played in neutral sites until it can return to Jacksonville, which is the full expectation come 2028. Ben, I'll start with you. What's your reaction to this news? This game is not going back on campus even temporarily. Going to Atlanta, going to Tampa. What are your immediate thoughts?
Boo! Boo! If for anyone not watching on YouTube, if you can't see, I'm throwing tomatoes at Jordan right now for relaying that terrible news to me. No, I get it. I mean, if we're just being real, I get it. Kirby Smart said it. And I don't know exactly the specifics of everything, but the thing that stood out to me there about what Jordan just read is Kirby Smart saying that Jacksonville stepped up to help out, make it worthwhile for everyone. And I think that that's probably a key part here. We know money rules this business at this point. And look, I just booed to start my answer. You guys just understand where I'm coming from. I want home and homes. I want home and homes all the time, wherever. That's the whole point of this sport, is to be in these cathedrals, on these college campuses. I've never gotten to go to a game at the Swamp. I've never gotten to cover a game at the Swamp. I'm sure that there's a lot of Georgia writers that are that way. I'm sure that there are, more importantly, Georgia fans that haven't gotten to go to games in the Swamp, because when you're budgeting for your year where you're going to go see Georgia games, going to see a game in the Swamp's not going to come up because Georgia's just not going to be there. And so that's where the games should be. That's where I want them to be. I understand why it's not happening. I mean, Jacksonville recognizes that this game is really important for the city of Jacksonville. And if this game went to Sanford in the Swamp back-to-back years, I don't think that it was ever going back to Jacksonville. And so I think that this was an important decision-making point. And I think that from Jacksonville's standpoint, it makes perfect sense. They don't want to run the risk of it never coming back. I'm sure that Kirby Smart isn't thrilled about it, given some of the comments that he's made in the past about wanting it to be home games anyways and wanting to not lose the recruiting weekend that each Georgia and Florida lose every other year. And so I'm sure he's not thrilled about it, but I think that this now does open up, a new world of the Georgia-Florida rivalry. We're going to see them playing in Mercedes-Benz. We're going to see them playing down in Raymond James. I have never seen I'm assuming it'll be 50-50 split more so. I mean, I know we've seen that in Atlanta. I've never seen it away from Atlanta or, I guess there have been some SEC matchups where Georgia fans have sort of made it close to 50-50, but in a way from the state of Georgia matchup, that's going to probably be close to 50-50, not in Jacksonville. It'll be fun. It'll be interesting to see. I'll be glad when it's over, though, because I do, if I'm listing out where I want these games to be, I want them to be in Sanford Stadium in the Swamp, and then I want them to be in Jacksonville, and then I want them to be in Tampa and Atlanta. So I'll be ready for the Atlanta-Tampa swing to be over, and that's probably exactly what Jacksonville wanted out of this.
I would tell the folks watching this live, throw in some comments. I'll read some of y'all's a little bit later on, but I mentioned this before we started recording, but I swear to y'all, I had an epiphany this week that Ben said, and I think Kipp tweeted this not long after the news came out. where it just hit me. I was like, there's no way they're bringing this game to campus because, like Ben said, there's no way they could take it off. But the financial ramifications, we'll see what we can find out, what Georgia and Florida are getting out of this. But you look at it from the standpoint of the Atlanta-Tampa piece, wasn't that long ago we were talking about Georgia Tech getting like $10 million to have the Georgia game played in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. You have to think that those numbers are pretty comparable. And then you talk about the Jacksonville piece of this. I saw that the mayor was quoted. I think this is a little bit farther back, but basically for the area of Jacksonville, they bring in like $30 or $40 million in revenue because of all the people who come to the game. It was in Jacksonville's best interest to keep this game in a neutral site, like we're saying, where you don't go and have a fantastic time in Gainesville and Athens, and they say, "Why don't we just do this on our own?" And they're going to give a big piece of the pie to both these schools, which I think, again, in this point where it seems like we're on the verge of revenue sharing, like I can't push back as much as I want these games to be played on campus. I understand the thinking because Ben hit on it, and I've mentioned this a lot. When I ask other writers, "Hey, what's the loudest stadium you've heard?" What I always heard from the folks on the Auburn beat was the Swamp. They said that 2019 game that was played in Florida was the loudest they've ever heard a stadium. I've never been in the Swamp, as this looks, unless I'm going on a Georgia bye week, I'm not going. And, a lot of the times those bye weeks line up because it's before they play in Jacksonville. So I understand folks' frustration, but to me, it makes a ton of sense. I get why they're doing this. The financials is just something you can't turn down. And even again, I've kind of come back around looking long term at keeping this game in Jacksonville because as much as people don't love the neutral site, there is history there. And we're talking about a sport that, we've got Oregon and USC now in the Big Ten. We got SMU in the ACC. I can get behind, let's keep this piece of history with it staying in Jacksonville. And, at the same time, you get a big financial boost by doing that. Kip, what's your reaction to this news? Any thoughts on sort of making this a touring neutral site game until they can return? It looks like full time to being played in Jacksonville.
Well, to quote the wise man, method man, cash rules everything around me. And there was never a doubt. There was never a chance that this game was going to go anywhere other than the neutral site. We all knew that. And at the end of the day, trying to keep the game in Jacksonville played a huge role. But we're talking about revenue sharing being right around the corner. And these programs are trying now to get that bottom line stretched out as far as they can. So neither of these teams, you look at Georgia Tech and they got a $10 million guarantee from Mercedes-Benz. So what is Tampa, these cities, what are they going to offer Georgia and Florida these years? We don't have the numbers, but they have to be very strong for the opportunity to have this game. So I think that the payout will probably dwarf what they would have gotten, if they had it on campus. We're talking what $1 to $2 million on campus. They're probably going to, at the very least, triple that, if not more. So that was always going to be the case. But yeah, it sucks for the fans because this game, the pageantry of college football, is going to a campus and having a different atmosphere than what you see in the NFL. It's just, if you're going to NFL venues, it just feels like you're just there. You're in a city, you go to the venue and you come back. That's basically it. It's just a different experience than going to a college football game. That's why the pageantry of college football is special. And so when you see fan bases looking at this sport and saying, where's my sport gone? Like, why is this now like the NFL? This is just one more step towards that. It's even if it's just for, a couple of years. And so I get Jacksonville, I get tradition. I'm from Brunswick. I know that, Georgia fans every year would go down to St. Simon's Island and make the trip from there to this game. So it's kind of, you're threading a needle there between, on campus, college football, and then the tradition of this rivalry game. So you don't really want to force change just for the sake of change in this situation. You have a unique atmosphere. The best way to maintain that is to go with these two neutral sites so that if you go on campus, like we said, it's probably not going back. I just don't see that happening. So they're trying to actually protect one of the biggest traditions in college football. It makes sense. It still sucks for fans that aren't going to get to see their rivalry game in the opponent's venue once. And so it's unfortunate, but it feels like there wasn't going to be a perfect answer for this. They took the answer that still padded their pockets.
Yeah, I mean, I think it makes a ton of sense. I'll go through some of the comments, and I put up a poll only about 15 minutes before we started recording, or probably like 5 or 10 minutes before we actually started recording, about how fans feel. At this point, there's been 102 votes, 39% indifferent about these games being moved to Atlanta and Tampa. 31% love it, 30% hate it. So it kind of feels like a mixed bag from everybody. Looking at some of the comments, Patrick O'Neill says that's like a home game for Georgia in the Mercedes-Benz Stadium. We've seen that a lot, but I also understand, that one, Florida is going to have that opportunity in Tampa, and two, how much have we heard people complain about? Well, Florida, I mean, they get to play it in Jacksonville. That's so much easier for them. So not upset about that part. I thought this part is interesting, and we've kind of hit on it. Craig Lawson said they played Georgia, Florida on campus in the 90s. What's the difference now with regard to returning to Jacksonville? The financial piece and the revenue sharing. I mean, I think if we were not discussing that part of the equation, I would come out much more against why are they playing this in a neutral site. But I do think that even athletic departments like Georgia that are in pretty good shape financially, I think they're being wise about bringing in as much money as out there to be had. I think that they understand that this is an opportunity. And to Kipp's point, I mean, you're not rocking the boat with, okay, we're going to get rid of this neutral site in Jacksonville. Do that, take the money, and then go about your day. All right, guys, any parting thoughts on this Jacksonville situation? I'll start with you, Ben. Anything else you want to say before we wrap this up?
Well, I mean, as much as I sort of poo-poo on the idea of them doing it this way, I get it. I also think as your poll, even though, small sample size, but I think that's probably a pretty good indicator. A lot of people don't care about this because most of them just watch the game on TV anyways. And so it doesn't really matter to them where the game is. I think that this comes down more to the people that are serial travelers to games and what it means for what they're going to have to do in those years. And then, the thing that nobody cares about, but obviously we do care about a little bit, is like, I want to cover a game in the Swamp. I want to go to the Swamp. I want to have a reason to go to the Swamp. And I would love for that to be for a Georgia game. It's just, that's never going to happen. And I think that this is probably the day that I have to sit there and have that reality check with myself, that if I'm going to go to a game in the Swamp, it's going to have to be in a non-Georgia football game.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I would love to see a game there, but sometimes you just got to accept what is and what isn't. And that's very clear. I want to read this Facebook comment. Anthony Waters said, not only brings revenue to Jacksonville, but here in Brunswick and surrounding islands, profit for several weeks would hurt businesses. And yeah, I think there's that piece of the areas around Jacksonville. And even too, I always bring up that, there are plenty of families that it's an annual vacation to go down and stay down in the islands and then go to the game on Saturday. So I understand that piece of it too. That's why on the whole, I get why this played out like it is. Doesn't mean I love it, but I understand why it played out like it did. Kipp, any parting thoughts before we end this?
Tampa's an easy flight. There's great breweries there. The pizza sucks, but you know what? It's another town to check off the list. For Georgia fans who may not go to, when they're playing a bowl game there, which I guess most Georgia fans probably really don't want to play many bowl games in Tampa these days with how the bowl breakdown goes. But yeah, I mean, playing in Atlanta is not really a new experience. It may be for, some of the younger Florida fans out there. And you know what? For Gator fans, it might be your only chance to play in Atlanta anytime soon. But I think it's kind of a shrug shoulders situation where you're taking what is, again, a really, really enjoyable experience, a unique experience, and just kind of sterilizing it, making it feel generic for a couple of years. And that's kind of where it is. So I think it's kind of a ho-hum for most people, and just play the game and move on from it.
If you are listening to the pod, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back with Swamp 24/7's Graham Hall to talk about Florida, get a good feel for the Gators, and what we will see on Saturday. And for all of you guys watching this video, we're going to sign off right there. Appreciate Kipp and Ben jumping on at the last minute just to talk a little bit about Wednesday's news. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for voting on that poll. Thanks for commenting. Let us know on the message board what you think of this move. We'll also put up a poll there when I get done with this video. And thanks you guys for watching. We'll sign off right there. Obviously, go to Dogs 24/7 and subscribe if you haven't already. Go to our YouTube, go to our TikTok. I'm going to have some good content these next few days getting ready for Georgia, Florida. So for Kipp Adams and Ben Wolk, I'm Jordan Hill. Until next time, take care, everybody.